Hello, my name is Lydia. I'm the teacher of this course. Today we will talk about the Kotlin language. Kotlin was created by JetBrains company. Work on this language started in 2010 and JetBrains first presented Kotlin to the public in July of 2011. I can say that Swift, its language for iOS development, was created in the same time. JetBrains wanted to create a modern language that works very well with Java, because usually we can create mobile application for Android with Java, but Java is a very old language and has a lot of problems. That's why the main idea was use Kotlin together with Java, but write less code, make programs safer, and keep the code easy to read. The name Kotlin comes from the Kotlin Island. Here on this slide I have the map of St. Petersburg, and here we have little island and it names Kotlin. This is also a small tradition because Java is named after the island of Java in Indonesia, so JetBrains choose a place name too. Kotlin started as a language for the Java virtual machine, but later it became bigger than that. And in 2017, Google announced that Kotlin is an officially supported language for Android development. Now Kotlin is very popular because it's a modern language that you can use in many places, not only in Android application development. Let's look at where Kotlin is the most useful. First of all, we can create multi-platform applications with multi-platform or key P. We can create Android applications, iOS applications, and moreover, usually teams of developers share business logic, something like networking, data validation, some business rules, and the UI can still stay native on each platform. It means that in Android we create native UI, in iOS we create native UI, but business logic we have multi-platform. Moreover, we can create backend applications with Kotlin, with Spring frameworks or Ktor framework, for example, like in Java. That's why it's a very popular language. The systems in Kotlin is lightweight and flexible, and it's built with Kotlin and coroutines. Then we can use Kotlin for front-end in the web, because we can write front-end code in Kotlin and compile it to JavaScript. So it can run everywhere JavaScript runs, for example, in browser. And of course, we can use it for Android applications development. And Google follows Kotlin first approach and recommends started new Android apps with Kotlin. Kotlin also helps us avoid common bugs with features like null safety. We will talk about it today. And it often needs less boilerplate code than Java. And we can compile the Kotlin programs to the Java bytecode. It means that we can create applications for different platforms, because Java can be run everywhere where we have the Java virtual machine, and we can repeat this situation with Kotlin and create a lot of systems for a lot of devices. When we learn new language, new programming language, of course, first of all, we should think about type systems to understand how this language works. And in a programming language, we have three types of typization. Sorry for this, but it's true. For example, we can divide our programming languages into two groups. First of all, it's languages with static type checking, like C, Java, or C#, and with dynamic type checking, like Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and others. Maybe some of us knows what is static type and dynamic type. Maybe you can tell me what is it. I think nobody knows. It's normal for second year students. That's why I will help you. So, static typing is determined by the fact that the final types of variables and functions are set at compile type, and compiler sure what type is where. In dynamic typing, all types are determined at runtime. I hope that you understand it. Then, and it means, for example, in JavaScript, we can create variable with type int, integer, and change it to type string. In C, Java, or C Sharp, we can't do it. When we use dynamic type checking, we can develop something faster than in static, but we can have a lot of problems in the future because when we have the ability to change the type of our variables, it means that we can forget something about our variables and work with some variable not in correct way. That's why some developers don't like the dynamic type checking because it's some kind of dangerous because we have a lot of problems with the changing of type in the runtime. That's why some hard and complex systems like banking systems usually develop in the static type languages like Java or C Sharp. The next reason how we can divide our languages it's strong typing and weak typing. What does it mean? Strong typing stands out in that the language does not allow mixing different types in expressions and does not perform implicit automatic conversions. For example, you cannot subtract a set from a string, or you cannot plus integer with double, like in Java or Python. Languages with weak typing perform many implicit conversions automatically, like C or JavaScript or PHP. And in these languages, we can summarize string with integers, for example. You can ask me that what do you say? I know the Java and I know that I can have the integer and string in one expression. But it's a little exception. In Java, we can use string and numbers in one expression because it's an exception for this language and it just know how to work with it. But we can't repeat it with another types. But in C, JavaScript, or PHP, we can combine different types of variables in one expression. And the last reason how we can divide our languages it's a nominal typing and duck typing. Nominal typing means that when we create our variable, we need to write the type of this variable. And duck typing means that when we create variable, we can just send the value by default, and our compiler will determine the type of this variable by this value, like in JavaScript, for example. And if we want to know what is Kotlin, we need to go to the next slide. And here we can see that Kotlin have static type checking, strong typing, and duck typing. What does it mean? It means that when we create variable, we can't change the type of this variable because it's a static type checking. When we create variables with different types, we can't combine them in the one expression because Kotlin has strong typing. And when we create variable, it's not necessary to write the type of this variable because Kotlin compiler very smart and Kotlin has duck typing and is not necessary to determine the type of variable. We can just write the value and our compiler will determine the type of this value of this variable by default value. It's very useful. I will show you in the examples. And let's start with basic types. In Kotlin, we have a lot of types, like in every languages, and these basic types have classes, and you can call methods of them. Of course, in Android, the compiler optimizes numbers and booleans to primitive values for speed, but usually Kotlin developers work with them like with objects. And we have numbers like integer, long, double, and float. We have booleans, we have characters and strings. And if you know the Java, I think you will not surprise that in Java, string it's unchanged value. And in the Kotlin, we will have the same. When we create string, we can't modify it. If we try to modify it, we will just have the new string. We have a lot of type of arrays with static size. If we want to use the some set of data with dynamic size, we can create the lists, and we of course have the maps, sets, and another types of collections. And very important rule, in Kotlin we always pass the variables into the function by value. Here we have basic types. Of course, it's a val, and it means that I can change the value inside this variable only once. I just set it in the first line, and if I try to do something with it, sorry, something like meow, because I always try to explain the code for students with cats, just because everyone like cats. And you can see that I can't reassign this value because it's val. But if I will change it to variable, to var, and now everything works. So I don't want to change the name of my cat, that's why I will return. Here I have the example how we create the string, but I previously told you that we have duct typing in the Kotlin. It means that we can write the code in such a way. I can just remove the type of my variable, and compiler will determine that this name is string just because here I have the value of this name. And it will understand that it means that it's a string if we try to set the string to this variable. Then here I have the example of char. We have another sign when we create the char. The char it's only one letter, not the several letters. That's why we use another quotes here. We can create integers. Of course, again, I can just create it without determining of type. And again, I can run it and everything will be okay. Then we have double, we have boolean, we have unsigned int, for example. But when we create it, we need to add such symbol in the end of our number to explain the compiler that this is not integer, it's unsigned integer. Then here I have the example how we can print some values to the logs of our program. And here you can find the example how we problems with online compilers. And here we have the example how we can add our variables inside the string in println command. We just use the dollar sign and add the name of our variable, and it will be replaced with current value of our variable in such a way. So here we print name, first letter of our name, age, weight, boolean about is our cat vaccinated or not, and value of chip identifier of our cat. Then in Kotlin, we of course have the primitive types like integer, but we can work with them with it like objects. For example, we can use some methods like here. I try to convert the weight of my cat to the int, but weight it's a double type, and I have special method to convert it to integer value. And in the log I will have the value not 4.2 but just 4. I hope it's clear. Then, another interesting things. Arrays. We have arrays with a fixed size, and the name of type depends from what type of data we want to put in this array. For example, here I have the example of integer arrays. To create it, I need to use special function int array of, and in the brackets, I just put all values of my array. This is the count of meow per day. And here we can find the examples how we can work with this type. We can move all information from our array to the string, for example, and here in the log, I have the input, not input, sorry, I have the results. I have my array in string type. Then array have the special field size. It's a number of values inside my array, and I think it's true. It's clear. It's just 3. And I told you about passing by value. In programming language, we have two situations. Sometimes some languages pass the variables to the function by reference. Sometimes it can pass by value. In Kotlin, we use passing by value, but with very interesting specific, because it depends from the type which we try to send to the function. For example, if we try to send the integer, boolean, or char value, we will just copy this value, and in the function we will work with another variable, with new variable. If we try to send the object of some class or array, we will copy the reference to this object, and it means that inside the function we will work with the same object. So let's see in the example. We have function visit vet with some parameters. I have this function here. I want to visit to vet with my cat, and I need some parameters like name, age of cat, vaccinated, and mouse per day. So some information about my cat. I send all this information like parameters to this function, and what we will have inside this function. Here in this function, we can't to change our parameters, because if I try to write something like name equals name plus something like this and try to run my application, I will have the problem here, because every parameter of my function will be the the value. It means that it cannot be reassigned and I can't to change this value. This is why I need to create the new copy of my variable if I want to change something and print the new value. That's why I need to remove this string. I try to modify some information and print it, and so I will run this code and we will see what can we do here. I print the values before calling this function here in these lines. I have the name of my cat, age, and another information about my cat. Then I run this function, and inside this function I can't change the old name. I just create the new name and I can write it to the logs. Then I create new age, and after function I will not change this value, and I create new flag about vaccination, because again I will not change this information outside my function, because we will just copy all this information when we run our function in such way. But for array, we will have another situation. We works with array like with object. That's why when I send my integer array to this function, I will not copy this array. I will copy the reference to this array and I will work with this array with the same object. And when I try to change the value inside my array, so what I will help? Inside my function, I have such array, and when I try to write the values of this array after the calling my function, I will have the same result. It means that when we send the information inside the function of different types, we will work with different types in a different way. We will not change string, integer, boolean, or another primitive types, but we will change the array or objects. Please remember this important rule because sometimes programmers have a lot of problems with it and you can have the bugs because of it, just because you think that you change the local value, the local copy, but it's not true and you will change the public information. Like here, I think that I change the copy of my int array, but it's not true. I will change the first, I will change the main array, which I created before the function. So, return to the presentation. And the next important part of Kotlin language, it's a work with nullable types. And here we have interesting system, but I think that every modern language has such system. It's a nullable types. We mark them with question mark, and here string with question mark means that inside my variable with name b, I can have null value. Null means nothing. And it means that when I try to do something with this variable, I need to check is it empty or not, or maybe I have some information inside it. How to do it? In Kotlin, we can do it in a usual, I think, way when we just use if condition and just check that b is not null. And if it's not null, we just send to this value the value b.length, the length of my string, and in another case we just use -1. It's a very short variant of checking emptiness when we need to get some information about nullable variable and put this information inside some value. We can check and get information from nullable values in another way. For example, here it's just special Elvis operator. It has such name. It means that, like in this line, we need to have the information about length of my string and put it into the L value. And here I just use this operator. It means that if inside variable b I have some information, I will get that information and put it to the variable. If I will not have such information, I will use default value -1. It's very simple. Then we have another operator how to get the information from our nullable variable. But if I have not any information inside b, the compiler will not run this line. So I will not have any information. And I have another variant like this double exclamation marks, but it's a dangerous way because if we have not any information inside b variable, we will have no pointer exception. That's why such a way it's dangerous, and please don't use it only in situation when you absolutely sure that in this variable you have some information. Here I create the variable with the type string with question mark. It means that I can create this variable in such a way. I can change this variable to the null and I can run it and it works. But here I have some prompts from my compiler. Of course, I can initialize my cat name with such way and everything will work. But I can't remove this type because if I will try to do something like this, I think I will have the problem because with this information, compiler can't to determine the type of my value. Is it nullable integer or nullable string or nullable something? That's why when we work with nullable types, we need to determine the type in such way. And here I have the examples of checking. Like here, I can check is it null or not. Of course, we know that now we have the null in the cat name. That's why, let me run this code again. That's why len1 in our logs will be -1. That's why just because here we have no, we have false, and that's why we put inside this variable the value -1. That's why here we have such value. Then another safe call method with question mark and dot, and we can see that we have not any crash of my code. Well, I just have the information inside the log that here I have null, and that's all. But it's without any default value. I will have the null inside the results. Sometimes it's not good way just because we can't to show the user the null information. It's unuseful. It's I think it's not useful in mobile application. Then another Elvis operator when we have the value and the value by default if we will have the null inside our cat name. And again, here we have -1 because cat name is null. And let me uncomment this. When we use such way of getting information from nullable type, I already told you that here we will have some problems. And yes, we will have null pointer exception. But if I will comment the line with cat name equals null, and now we have information inside cat name variable, I run this code again, and now everything is correct because it will work when we have some information inside cat name variable. That's why it's better not to use such way of working with nullable variables. It's better to use this one or just check it with if condition. We can work with if in the Kotlin like in other languages. Then the next about the Kotlin, it's loops and conditions. And here we don't use switch. I hope that you know what is switch. It's some kind of if condition, but with a lot of cases. In Kotlin, we use for switch special word when. And here I have the example how it can work. Here we determine the value inside our level with when condition, and it depends from ranges. It's just an example. We can work with it in usual way. I will show you in the online compiler. And in Kotlin language, we have not traditional for loop like in Java or in C++, when you can create something like for, int, and another. We have only for each loop, and it will look like this. For the link to the one item of our list, the link to the list, it's an int array, for example, and we can do something with our items. Let's go to the examples. Again, about cats. And we have the value mood, and I think that my cat is hungry, but we will try another variance. And when cat is hungry, it can sound with, I think, meow, like my cat when it wants to have some food. I think it's always. And let me run this code. So mood is hungry. That's why sound is meow. Then it's example of when condition. And here we just determine that if our mood is hungry, equals to hungry, we will have this. If equals to sleepy, we will have this, and moreover. Of course, if you have if you don't want to get some value and put it to some variable, you can use when in a usual way, like when mood. Let me copy it just because I'm little lazy. And here I can do something like print. I have only one line, that's why I can use it without brackets, if I remember it correct. And else print just meow. So, and here I just print meow because my cat is hungry. It works. And if I need to have more than one line of code in every case, I can just add the brackets and add what I need. And here you can see that what's the difference between println and print. Print means that I will print everything in the one line. That's why, of course, better to use println, just because it's easier to read information with when every fact in a special line. And here I have more than one line in the case of my switch. Of course, it's when, but if you in your another language think about it like a switch, I think it's the same. Then maybe it's time to change the mood of my cat and run the code. And we have another results. Just because when our cat is sleepy, it sounds in another way. And here I have another answers, and here again. Then let's see to the when we need to use the range of values. Like here, I have the cat and the age of my cat is 2 years. That's why I think it's kitten. If I will change it to 12, for example, and run, I will have the result that my cat is a senior cat. And I agree with it. It's very senior. And what else? What else? About for each. Here I have the list of cats, the names of the cats, and I can work with it in such way. It means that I just go one by one through all of my values inside this list and print hello with the name of current cat. If I need the loop with numbers, like this one, we just use the special range. This means that in the memory we will create the array of numbers from 1 to 3, from 1 to 3. And we will print the cat with numbers. Often we need the values inside our array and the number of this, the index of this value. That's why we use it in such way. I think it's strange a little, especially when you know how to do it in Java or in C++, but it's not so often case, that's why it's okay. And here I just print the cat with its index. What is the list? List, it's a dynamic collection of some items. Here it's a dynamic collection of strings, and I can change the length of this collection, but not here, just because with this command I create the immutable list. It means that I can't to change the length of this list. I think that's all about loops and conditions. Of course, if you need to check something like if, we can use something like this one, and here I can do something. And in Kotlin we don't use such semicolon because we don't need it. We just write the every command in the special line, But as far as I remember, I can do something like, let me copy it, something like this. Of course, I need to write the println comment correctly, and it will work. So if you need to put more than one comment inside one line, you can use semicolon, but it's a very bad idea because it makes your code less readable. That's why we don't write the code in such style. It's very strange because we have a lot of lines of code. We have not any problems to create another lines of code. That's why we don't write in such style. The functions. Today I will show you only base level of functions in Kotlin, just because Kotlin it's not only object-oriented language, it's a functional language. That's why we can work with functions in Kotlin like with objects. We can put it into the variables, we can send it to the functions like parameters. I think it's too hard for the first lecture. That's why today I just show you how to create the function and implement it. And here I have some examples of functions. Here, first of all, we need the fun special word to create the function. And in internet we have some joke that Kotlin is fun. That's why we have fun special word. And first of all, we create the name of our function, then the parameters of function, and if this function need to return something, we just add the type of return value. And what else? In Kotlin, we can write in this way. We can just return the result of when condition if we need. Here, the example of function which will not return anything. We just don't write something like void in Java or another words. We just have the empty space. That's all.